I frequently joke that data is my love language. Screw all the other five. It's data for me. I want to see it all in a spreadsheet and I'm happy. But there's been a lack of data and analytics historically in HR when it comes to compensation and compensation management, either from market data is like too expensive for anyone to access to we just don't have the right data in front of us. Like, how have you thought about this problem and solving it either with technology or just in your personal experience?
Yeah. Data is so important. It's one of the inputs that helps you make decisions. But one thing I would warn companies is seeing data as the solution. Like data alone is not what actually helps you make a decision. It's certainly a very valuable and important input. But to your point, you might find that market data is too expensive, or incomplete, or inaccurate because market data tells you an engineer makes $50,000 a year. And you're like, there's no way I can hire a software engineer in the US at $50,000 a year. I don't know where they're getting this data from. And so I think that you need to go in with a sober mind, understanding, hey, no market data set is perfect, but you should still try to find enough market data that helps you build your confidence. And if you can't, then what are you going to do? You're going to have to do something. And so I think being prepared for that potential reality is important. And you do have ample data at times. You may not have that market data set, but you can see job postings from other companies. You may have existing employee compensation data that can inform, hey, on average, what have we been paying? But in a perfect world, you would be able to find a market data set that is affordable for your organization, is accurate and relevant for the roles you're hiring for, in the industry you're hiring for, in the location you're hiring for. It's just the unfortunate part is that's not like the absolute reality for a lot of businesses. I've always thought that with Assemble, we can help companies face that reality of maybe you don't have one perfect market data set, so you have to rely on multiple data sets, or maybe you have such a unique compensation program that no data set is going to help you. A good example of that is you might be an organization that says, we don't pay differently on salary. We are pay for performance and we pay differently based on bonuses at the end of the year. And for that reason, we are going to pay every level the same. Well, that's a very different philosophy than a company that says, we always aim to pay at the 50th percentile and we differentiate on salary based on tenure, performance, skill set, et cetera. And that's so different from a third company. And I've actually met companies that do this, which is they look at the cost basis of this is how many dollars in total we can allocate to this department. We think we need 25 heads to support the needs of that function. And we're going to divide that. And that's going to be the average compensation. So if we hire someone at above that average, we need to compensate that with someone that's below that average. And that's a much more kind of like backwards looking and not market driven at all, but worked well for that company. And so I think like data is such an important factor into your program. And notice that for that third category of companies I was talking about, they did use data. It just wasn't market data. So that's where I think companies should be looking at data and metrics. And one thing that kind of I think is important to highlight, I have seen so many different functions in my former job in the finance seat where I saw sales and marketing and engineering come with all of these metrics and reports and dashboards. And it was always very difficult for HR to come or the people team to come with similar metrics or dashboards, in part because they didn't have the tooling, in part because they didn't have the way to capture and report on this data. And so I think it's one of the things that has exacerbated this bad reputation for people leaders as not being very data driven or very metrics driven. And I think that there's an opportunity for people leaders to really step up and be strategic in capturing some of the internal data first, being able to report on it, and then show, hey, I can't actually report on this because I don't have the budget for purchasing market data. So what you're asking me to do is an impossible task. How am I supposed to do that? Right? Or you're asking me to report on the employee attrition due to compensation, but I have no way of capturing and categorizing that data. So how am I supposed to do my job, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, if I don't have the proper tooling?
Yeah, that's such a good point. The tooling is always the hardest. I'm telling you, like, I just feel like HR is the last people to get budget, but the reality is I almost wish it was flipped, that we were the first people, because we're the people responsible for attracting and retaining the talent. And we know like replacing, like you said earlier, is so expensive. And also like you want people to do their best and feel like they're compensated fairly, and they're going to show up and do better work if they feel like they're compensated fairly. But we often don't get the tools to actually do that. And so it feels like a lot of times HR is like a losing battle. Some days where I get like really disenfranchised with my own work because I'm like, I can't get the things I need to do this job really well.
Yeah.
It's
and
tough.
market
I
data.
battle it every day. I try to support our people, leaders who are customers and friends of ours in trying to get, we're not asking for the world. It's get enough budget so that you can succeed at your job, which should help the company accomplish its objectives. I do think there's obviously a reason why early stage companies struggle more than larger companies, because they'll say, if we don't double sales, there's no team, there's no anything.
Yeah, we don't exist.
I do understand the motivations of smaller, earlier stage companies, but at some point, I think that goes away. And so you have to combat that early stage mentality at some point and say, enough is enough. We've reached the size of the organization where this idea of not giving HR budget is not going to be productive. It's going to be counterproductive to what we're hoping to accomplish.
It's so silly.